that hard process isn't a sign that we should give up initially. I mean, there is an element of burnout, right? But it's a sign of actually, this means my brain's growing, and let me try again. Let me take a break. Let me come back. What other things I can do? And because I get 10 out of 10 in everything, amazing. But we want to not be getting 10 out of 10. And it's got to feel difficult. Obviously not all the time, but our brain grows and gets stronger because it's like a muscle, just like all the other muscles in our body.
I think sometimes that intuition in some people is really loud, and it's so loud that you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
And sometimes
But it's almost like it was a deeper knowing that I'm not meant to be doing what I'm doing right now. I don't know. If I think back now, and I've actually never said this, but like it felt a bit hollow. I was like, something's missing. And I was like, and it was just an easy chat. So no, I'm excited.
Well, I'm glad you're here. There's so much I want to talk about with you. I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to use this as a very selfish, kind of self-indulgent moment because even though we have spoken before, there's still a lot about you that I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess this is a good opportunity to just dive into that. And also the work that you're doing professionally, which I think is so important. And I definitely want to get into that.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, South Africa. Now, when I first met you, I was like, this lady's got an accent, but I can't quite picture it. Is it South African? Is it? So, you were born in South Africa?
That's right. Born in South Africa, Pretoria, 1982. And I found my little birth certificate the other day, or like a little badge the nurses put over you about the time that you were born. So it was on a Friday at 10 to 5. So I was like, I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but that was it. So my mum's Afrikaans, my dad's Portuguese, my mother tongue's Afrikaans. So I actually speak Afrikaans. It feels really weird speaking to my mum in English. It's just, it's so weird. And even my sister who lives in Wimbledon, very weird speaking to her in English. And then, we'd speak English to my dad. So grew up there all my life, stayed in the same house until I left to come here, which was probably when I was about 23.
Okay.
So it was good.
Do you speak in Portuguese?
I don't, and I desperately want to learn. And I'm always telling my dad, I wish he taught us when we were younger.
It's a hard language.
It is hard, but I think the challenge there was because English was his second language. It was my mum's second language. It was just, I think it was just another one to throw into the mix. So I can speak Afrikaans and I can speak English, but every time I go back to Portugal, I come back thinking, I need to learn Portuguese. I'm going to get myself a Portuguese tutor. It's now another 12 months and we still haven't got a Portuguese tutor. But it's something I really, really want to learn. Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say? What's the smallest step you can take towards?
I'm going to be doing that. No, and fair enough. I did go as far as to start researching some, and then just
Duolingo. Have you used Duolingo?
I have not used that yet.
Duolingo, so it's an app.
Is that the app? Okay.
When I used it, it was free.
Okay.
And I was so amazed.
Was it good?
It was amazing. And every day it gives you a little, like a very short lesson that you have to do. And it's like, it's like any app. It tells you, it celebrates you as you go along. Well done, you've done this and you've learned this. And, it's fascinating. It's really, really, actually I should look into that again. I remember using it a while ago, and I think I was trying to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
It's really good.
So here's the thing. I will do that. I will download it today.
There you go.
And I'll keep you posted. I've got 6 weeks before I go back. We can do a little bit of learning in 6 weeks' time.
Not even 5 minutes in and I've started coaching you.
No, I will. I definitely will, because it is something that's really important to me. And I think, when we've chatted before, I'd love to move to Lisbon. And it's... Again, we talk about following those breadcrumbs, and this is a breadcrumb in a different way. And I'm like, it's not going away. So I'm going to embrace that part of myself. And we can do a few minutes a day. We can do that.
Absolutely. There you go. So I want to get into how you kind of arrived at what you're doing now. So when you were in South Africa, what was kind of your upbringing like, your childhood like, school, all of those things? What was your life like?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I'm very lucky to say that, I grew up with, mum and dad both loved me, privileged in many, many ways. But I think also really sheltered to an extent in terms of, well, I suppose maybe just if I see of how kids are in London, so much more aware versus what I was like. But it was a happy childhood, definitely. And but one of the things is my dad would often come and visit family that we had in Portugal, my granny, my grandpa. So from a young age, not that we went every year, but I got that buzz of, oh, there's a bigger world out there than my immediate community. And I think, I think initially once, if I'm thinking about going back to high school now, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, so just bring me back when I need to come back. But I think obviously when you start to get to those years in terms of what are you going to do after school and, but you need a career, you need to be safe. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I absolutely loved art. So in high school, I took an art subject, and then my dad said, oh, you're going to take computer science, which I was absolutely terrible at, and I failed it miserably. And I then quit computer science, and then there was another art subject that came out, and I did that. So I basically had two art subjects that I was doing, and I loved art. But and that was something I wanted to pursue, but I think very traditionally, it's not a safe career. And so I remember thinking, oh, but what do I want to do? I don't know what I want to do. I'm 17, 18, because the education system there, you basically everybody nearly goes through until you're 18 to do your A-levels or matric, as they call it there. So my mum sent me to an educational psychologist, and I did a bunch of tests like EQ, IQ, aptitude, and then it generates career options. So nursing was one, and I thought that's never going to work because I can't stand blood. I was like, that's just not going to work. And one of the other things that came up on there, I can't remember anything else, but teaching was one. And I still thought, I was like, oh, okay, well, I could work with little kids and I could do my art with the kids. That would be a lot of fun. Fast forward to when I'm a teacher, I absolutely hate teaching art to children because it's so messy. And I'm like, oh, this is not fun at all. But yeah, so I think, and I was always fascinated in human behavior. I even think towards the end of high school, my mom had bought me this book around, I don't know, understanding the brain, people's behavior, something like that. And I love that. So actually, I wanted to study psychology, but that was also, well, you're going to be studying forever and ever. And then it's also like, how do you get a job? And my dad was quite, coming from the best of intentions, we want something safe. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do teaching. I didn't love it. I think at uni, I remember feeling, is this it? This is not what I want to do. But I persisted. And I remember when I did my first teaching practice, I was like, okay, we can maybe make this work. But I decided then to do psychology as an extra. So I did a psychology degree in the evenings and I did my teaching in the day. And I loved that, absolutely loved that. And then I carried on to do my honours. And then I thought, okay, and this was my teaching degree was finished, my honours degree was finished. I'm like, I need to go get a job. And at that point, it was quite the craze for a lot of South Africans to come over to the UK to teach for 2 years and then to go back. And funny, I was actually looking at a nannying position in America at the same time. But somehow, I can't remember quite what happened, ended up that I decided, oh, let me go join my friend who's teaching in the UK. I'll go stay with her and find my way from there, and then come back and do my master's in educational psychology. So bear in mind also, I've been living at home all the time. I've never moved out through uni. So living by myself in a strange country was a big shock to the system. I remember phoning my mum once in Tesco saying, how do I use fabric conditioner? How does this work? Like in tears. I was like, I don't know what to do. What do all these things mean? Yeah, and I think teaching here was interesting, but I don't know. If I think back now, and I've actually never said this, but like it felt a bit hollow. I was like, something's missing. Is this it? That same thing. Is this it? This is not what I'm meant to be doing. And I remember feeling just really frustrated, really alone, and almost just not satisfied. Like there must be something more, but maybe there's not something more. Maybe this is just it. And I remember thinking, like, for a long time I was trying out different teaching roles. I do small group teaching, worked in pupil referral units as well. But again, I was like, I felt lost. Maybe lost is the word. That's if I think about it now. And, moving on from there, one of the other things I was really interested in that I kind of fell into was fitness. So, I mean, at school, I hated sport, hated fitness, hated running. You would not get me to do anything. I absolutely hated it. But I think coming here, and a friend of mine got me to join a gym with her, and it was really fun. And it was like, oh, this can be quite exciting and fun. And I remember being really inspired by a fitness instructor and her spinning class, and like the music was going, and people were like cheering, and that whole goosebumpy feeling that you get. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do this. But I remember still thinking on that bike, it was a Thursday evening, I was like, I can't do that. I can work with little kids. I can't work with adults. That's sort of what the story was, because I think when you work with 5 and 6-year-olds, you become really good at breaking things down. But how we talk to children is sometimes very different to how we communicate with adults. Well, maybe not all the time. Sure. And so I struggled a lot with that. But that was a little bit of like, oh, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. And so then I got into fitness, and I first did a qualification in terms of teaching exercise classes to kids. And then I did exercise to music, and that's sort of where I found a mini passion there, and I absolutely loved it. So I taught spinning, I taught Fight Club, Body Pump, fitness circuit, UFC Fit. But I think one of the things that I found then, I was still teaching full time because this was something I could do part time. Okay. And I didn't see that being a full time career, teaching classes, because I also kind of came into it, I don't know, my early 30s. And I do feel like stamina wise, that's something that, my kind of colleagues in that industry were a lot younger than me. And I was like, well, where do I see this going? I can't see myself doing this all the time. And that's actually when I was starting to look at personal training. I was like, well, to become a personal trainer. And around that time, the school that I was with sent me on a coaching course purely by fluke, saying, oh, there's this coaching thing that's on. We know you like your fitness coaching. I'm going to send you over the stuff. Have a look at it. And if you want it, you can go on it. So it was actually a taster to life coaching. I was like, who read this? Because clearly like two things are very different. But it was really fascinating. And that's when life coaching kind of made it on the scenes. And so I went to the free week. It was over the weekend. So I did that and I loved it. And I was like, this kind of ticks a lot of the boxes in terms of the psychology side, human behavior side, but we're moving forward, it's not going as deep. And so then I decided to get my qualification in becoming a performance coach. And then for a long time, I think I kind of coasted because I'm still teaching throughout all of this. And I'm still thinking, how do I now make this into a business? Who am I to run my own business? Like that felt so overwhelming and incredibly scary. And back then, a lot of people said to me, oh, but you could bring coaching to kids. And I was like, no, I want to leave education. I want to leave. I'm done. I want to leave. So for a period of time, I had some coaching clients, women confidence coaching, helping them make career career changes. But yeah, for some reason, and it's so weird. Now that I look back, I'm like, that voice was telling you this isn't it. But I wanted to ignore that. And I remember still where we lived in London, I was walking home and deep inside, that voice was like, Natalie, this isn't it. And I'm like, no, but it's it. This is it. I just have to pursue. And by chance, so that went on for a good, I'd say about 6 months. And the position that I then had at the school at that point in time was a cover teacher. So it was a lovely school in London. But I was, I moved from being the year 1 teacher. Now I was kind of covering all the classes. So admin-wise, that freed up a lot of time for me because the head teacher was lovely. She knew I was I wanted to make a change. And so she kind of gave me that year. And by chance, I was looking after a group of year 6s that were really stressed about their exams. And I just come off a stress coaching day just as a CPD day. And I'm like, oh, well, I can tell you what happens in your brain and I can tell you what to do. And I purely on the cuff there just pulled things out. And these kids were so engaged with what I was sharing. And I mean, I got goosebumps and I was thinking, oh my goodness, like, why are we not actually teaching kids about this? And that was when I guess the seed started to be planted for Power Thoughts. And it's so funny. So I literally, the next week I delivered another lesson. I was like, scrap what's in the curriculum. I'm just going to teach my own stuff here. And I remember a mum contacted me, or she bumped into me as I was walking home, and she's like, whatever you've done with Harvey, please carry on doing it because he's coming out of his shell. And then another mum said the same thing to me about her daughter. And I just thought, hold on, maybe I am onto something here. Is there a way that I could bring my coaching skills? Because at that point I was also looking at, do I become a mindfulness teacher? And I was looking at mindfulness training. But I wanted to go a bit deeper. And I thought, is there a way that I could bring my coaching strategies and skills and tools and teach it to children? So it's not pure coaching in that sense, but can I teach this to children? And so I literally just started playing around and putting lesson ideas together. And I went to the deputy head and I told her what I'd planned. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever, you've just got to cover the class if you want to do that. Try out your different lessons. And that's when it started. So I think I was about 33 then. So a good chunk of time from when I first came to the UK, which was about 10 years later.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's I love the story because what you started off doing is so very different to what you're doing now. And I think you mentioned following those breadcrumbs, and that's kind of part of the journey, isn't it? And then sometimes we're doing things we don't kind of see. We kind of, it's like, what's the point? It's like, why am I doing this? Yeah. You said something which really resonated with me in that when you were, I think it was when you were teaching and you were coming home and thinking, this is not, this isn't it. It's like, why isn't this it? What you said something was missing. What was missing?
Good question. I think, I don't know. How do I describe this? I just felt lost, I think, and empty. I think that is, if I look back now, that was the way. And it's not this idea of, you can look on social media and like, find your passion, find this. But it's almost like it was a deeper knowing that I'm not meant to be doing what I'm doing right now. But I remember also feeling really frustrated because I'm like, well, if it's not this, then what is it? Because I'm not happy. Like, this is not what I want to be doing. Surely you can't go to a job and be so miserable. Like, what's the point? Like, surely there's... And I remember, I mean, my mum's best of intention. She's like, yeah, but there are lots of people that go to work that don't like their jobs. And I'm like, I don't want to be one of them. And I appreciate that, And I don't think it's this thing of everybody's got a passion, that you've got to find this passion. I mean, there have been times that I've wanted to break up with Power Thoughts, let me tell you that. Now we can get into later on. But I do feel like it was just a deeper, I can just call it a deeper inner knowing that this is not my path. I'm meant to be doing something else.
Intuition.
Yeah, 100%.
It's intuition. And I think... I don't know. I'm saying this. I think this is my personal opinion, but I think sometimes that intuition in some people is really loud, and it's so loud that you can't ignore it. Yeah. And sometimes we ignore it and we say, "Oh, that's nonsense." Like you say, it's like your mama said. Yeah. Everyone doesn't like their job. Yeah. Like, there's so many people that go to work not happy. I mean, you just go on the tube in London in the morning and you look at people's faces. I'm pretty sure that most of those people are not enjoying themselves. So I think to listen to that intuition and to pay attention to it, it takes a skill, and it can take. I don't know how long it took you. How long did it take you before? Well,
that's what I was saying, because I was just thinking now in terms of how old I was. I think it took a good few years, maybe about, I even want to say, well, okay, if we look at when I came to the UK, which is about 23, 24, I can't even go back that far, but. Well, then until about 9-10 years. Right. And initially, I think learning to listen to your intuition does take some people it is really loud. But I think if you're not accustomed to it, and I mean, the work that we do, it's very much a part of what I do now. But I think for somebody maybe that might be listening, well, how do I listen to it? I think it is a skill, and it is also about learning to kind of trust that little voice, because for a long time I also didn't trust that voice. I was like, no, but this isn't like, don't tell me to go make my own thing. Like, who does that? I can't make my own thing. That's for somebody else to do. I can't go and create my own program. Like, that's not me. Yeah. But the little voice didn't stop. It didn't stop. It didn't stop. And I think it takes courage and guts, but it also takes a bit of skill to tap in and recognize what that is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think when I was going through that, it was almost like I thought at first that's the lazy side of me.
Yeah.
It's the lazy part of me saying I don't want to go to work.
Yes.
Right? Because that's how I felt.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to work.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I didn't want to work, because I've had a job since I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
But it was the fact that I didn't enjoy the work. It wasn't fulfilling. I had that hole in my stomach, just like you explained.
Yeah.
And it took me a decade, the same amount of time to actually hold on a minute.
Yeah.
This is getting too much. And for me, it had a knock-on effect on my mental health. And I think that was the aha moment for me. I was like, right, this, like you said, this cannot be life, right?
Yeah.
People cannot be waking up in the morning and going to work and hating every single moment. And I thought, well, and again, I was told by people around me, that's life.
Yes.
Life is hard, tough. Yeah, you got to work it. You got to just push through it. And I was just like, that intuition was like, no, why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah.
And I think that took a long time. And it sounds like you went through a little bit of that. I'm keen to know, during these stages, did you have this, you kind of alluded to this already, did you feel like there was imposter syndrome there?
Oh, totally. All the time. Still. She's still there. She's still doing her thing. And definitely, who am I to do this? So, I mean, what I'm about to say now, and I'm very mindful because but the thought, I'll just come out and say it. The thought that I had initially is, who am I to do this? I'm just a primary school teacher. Now, what I mean by that is, being a primary school teacher, I think, or teach is a really hard job. But what I mean by that is, in my mind, I had built it down to, but I just work with little kids all day, and I talk to little kids and little kids' voices, and I break things down really simply. Who am I to get really complicated with business and tax and talk to head teachers? I mean, I had like a bit of a panic attack the first time I had to compose an email to a head teacher about, I was like literally sat there for 2 hours. What do I say? And so I think that imposter has always been there. It's something I've really had to like work through. And I think initially I didn't think I was capable of doing that, like doing my own thing. Because I also would often think, I'm not a leader. I've naturally, my personality style, I'm not naturally the one, like if there's a group exercise, somebody else can take the lead. I will gladly follow along. I'm not the one that has to take the lead. You know, you've got some people that are like, right, that's not me. And so I'd also have the story, well, I'm not a leader. I can't lead, which is interesting because one of the mentors that I really looked up to, and I did this personality profiling assessment through them once. And I appreciate, like, it's just a snapshot. But she said to me how my points were pointed on the graph showed that actually, if I need to step into that leadership role, I will easily do so. It's not my natural style or tendency, but I can do so if I need to. And that was really interesting because then she actually, for the first time, opened up my eyes saying, but when you're a teacher, you're leading a group of 30 kids, which is a very, very hard job to do. And they all got different abilities and they all have that's not the easiest job to do. But yeah, initially that story on my mind was, I'm really good at breaking things down, but that's where it stops. I can't communicate with grown-ups. I can communicate with kids. That was basically it.
Yeah, it's fascinating the things that we say to ourselves in those moments, and how we can start to believe that narrative. We can absolutely start to believe it. You know, there's so many times I was like, well, this is not for me. This is not, this is not what I want to do. And it's like, well, what are you going to do then? What else? What you like you said, you're not the kind of person to go out there and start your own business. Well, who are you to do that? You know, it's like, well, yeah, maybe you're right. And part of me was also, I felt like walking away from a career that for me at the time and what I was doing was very well paid. It was very well, it was secure in the way that, there was always lots of jobs. Every time I didn't move around that much, but I knew there was always work. And I was like, well, why are you being so ungrateful?
Yes.
Come on, you've got a job which so many people don't have. You've got a job where you get to wear a suit every day. You get to travel into London. And I love that whole, we've talked about this, whole lifestyle of London and the glitz and the glam. And I was like, you get to do that every day and you're complaining.
Yeah.
And that also was a big, big part of me to think, well, I should just suck it up and get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that for me was a dangerous path to go down, because it just, we know this, right? You continue down a path of unfulfillment, it's gonna lead to more unfulfillment.
Yeah, and I do think the gratitude aspect definitely, because what a fortunate position to be in the country that we're in, and the opportunities that I was given, and the amazing school that I was working. It was a lovely, lovely. I mean, you hear a lot of things about inner city London schools, but this was such a lovely, like, little haven. And I was like, just be grateful, just be grateful, just be grateful. But that unfulfilled feeling just so unfulfilled, it just, it didn't go away.
Yeah.
It didn't go away.
I think what helped me through that was at some stage, and again, it took me a decade or so. But
maybe that's like the thing. Right?
Yeah, maybe that is. I think some people discover it much later. Some people go through it. I mean, but for me, it was recognizing that that where I'd got to, it was a stage where it was a decade later, I'd risen up the ranks through the hierarchy of management, through the different salary bands as well. And when I was thinking, well, this is, I can't do anything else, I kind of had to stop and think, hold on a minute. I didn't get here by accident, right? I didn't get here having this senior position, having people thinking I'm worth X amount of money, paying me that money because of fluke, right? That was down to my hard work. That was me deciding not to go to university, deciding that I'm going to pursue a career, putting in the hours, waking up at 5 a.m, getting to the gym for 6, getting to work for 7, leaving work at 8 in the evening. That was me. That was my hard work. And I thought, well, if I can do that with this, then surely I can do that with something else. And that gave me a little bit of a ray of hope. I was like, well, actually, maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
But what it was, I didn't know, right? And that's the problem. You start, what am I going to do? I haven't got any skills. And we start to give ourselves that narrative. But again, just looking at your background, there was looking at what you're doing now, coaching. I mean, it's a combination of teaching, it's communication, it's coaching, so your fitness career. It's interesting. You said you're not a leader. What are you doing when you're teaching a class?
Exactly. You're leading.
Yeah.
And, it is so funny because that is the thing, I think it's Steve Jobs' quote, which I'm not going to say perfectly right now, but like, it doesn't make sense. The dots going forward don't make sense, but when you look back, they do. And if I think of the time I'd spent doing the fitness career stuff and teaching classes. I mean, I was petrified of speaking in front of adults. Like, I could do the 5 and 6-year-olds easy, no problem. 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, fine. But adults, that stressed the bejesus out of me. I was like, I can't do that. But again, that little voice was like, you really want to do this? You really want to do this? And I mean, I still remember my first few classes that I taught, and I covered for a friend of mine at some posh gym in London, and because it wasn't him, like half the class walked out before they even gave me a chance, and that was like my first or second class that I covered. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm bad before I've even started. And I think, but those skills in terms of teaching a class and getting the energy up in the class and being up front, that's so I can see in the work that I do today in terms of the workshops that I do and the speaking events. And I love that. I absolutely love it now. And I was like, Nat of 10 years ago would be like, what the fudge has got on here? So that to me is like, okay, well, that's why I had to do that. That was my journey in terms of giving me the confidence. And that was also a big confidence building exercise. You spoke there about your realization of, well, you didn't just get to this level where people value, like you had to do some things, like clearly people see stuff in you, you've got skills that you can contribute. And I think for me, a big confidence building factor was that being able to be petrified of speaking in front of groups of people to then being able to lead classes. And they were really popular. They were packed out. They were, people would say, oh, when are you doing it again? When are you doing it again? So they were good. And I think that showed me, I was like, okay, well, if I can do that, then I can do this. I've not thought about that for a long time, so thank you for that. I needed that right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It is. And I'm interested to know, when you were doing the fitness coaching, teaching, what was the feeling like inside? I mean, you mentioned that you were...
It was amazing. It was amazing. Oh, my goodness. Like goosebumps. Like it just... Obviously not every time. But I think when you had the crowd and the group that just feeds off that energy... Oh, I don't know. It's goosebumps.
I hear.
I can even think about it now, and I do get that now as well. In definitely with more group workshops. I think there's something about the energy of about a group of people, and we know, like the science behind that. But even sometimes just one-to-one with kids, if something they've said or something's happened, and I guess that was like, this is the feeling. But then also being mindful that feeling's not going to be there all the time. Because it does start to wear off a little bit after you've done it a lot. And I remember having that same feeling when I first started delivering power thoughts in classes at schools, the same feeling. But yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, so for me, first of all, yes, indoor cycling's my jam as well. We've spoken about this. It's
we should do a class.
We need to. We should go to cycle actually.
We should. Yeah, we should do that. Let's do that first. Well, I was saying teach a class. Look at us. Let's just go to a class.
Just go to a class. But that was my jam, and the feeling I got, first of all, after just taking part in a class before I was teaching and coaching, that's what made me think, hold on a minute, that guy has just finished his work. He's just finished work, right? So the GX instructor, and he's buzzing.
Yes,
and I'm buzzing. I want to do that. I want to be able to make other people feel the way I feel right now.
That's exactly it.
And I want to feel like he probably feels right now as well. And I was like, well, I don't get that in my job. And to me, that was a big aha moment. And it was just like, well, just do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it didn't even... Yeah, there was the self-doubt. Like, no, don't be silly. Like you, I went into it late. I think I was 29 at the time when I was thinking about becoming a PT.
Yeah.
So, approaching 30, everyone's younger than you. And I remember asking the guy who ran the studio, and they were offering a group instructor course, one of those exercise to music type things. And I said, I'm 29. And he's like, don't be silly, And he was like a 22-year-old. So,
yeah, you can do it.
And he's like, nah, I've seen you come here. You're fit. He goes, your age is just a number. I was like, yeah, you're right. And he really helped me, really motivated me. But that was it, wasn't it? It was just wanting to have that feeling of, again, it's hard to describe, isn't it? Of course, we know what it is. It's endorphins, it's dopamine, it's all of these things. But it was just like, surely I didn't have any of that, right? Yeah. Every day went by, and the only time I got a little bit of that feeling was when it was bonus time.
Yeah.
And that was, it was like, oh, I'm getting a bonus. And then it was only because then I can go and spend that on something.
Yeah.
So it is just... Yeah, I understand it. I think following that is a different ballgame, right? So everyone says, "Oh yeah, that feels good." It's just, but then actually making that step to actually, this is what I'm going to do. That's another part of that journey.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that. So for you, when was the point where you thought? I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier that I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do.
Power thoughts or
power thoughts? Yeah, power thoughts.
So let me just think. Sorry, let me just... okay, so yeah, I remember teaching those kids off the cuff, and that then started to develop into a bit of I was trying out things, not thinking I'm doing a program yet.
Right.
But I think as the term went on, I was like, oh, could I do this into a program? And that's roughly when I contacted a friend of mine, Lucy Sheridan, who you should definitely get onto this podcast. She does a lot of stuff around comparison, but at that point she was also doing a lot of stuff around brand mentorship. And I'd been following her for years, and I was like, I need someone to help me put this into an idea. So I think it was roughly 2016 or 2015 that I reached out to her, and we'd started working together. I'm like, I think I have this idea where I want to put power thoughts together for kids. And so I worked with her for a good year. I think 2016 was when I then decided to go part-time at school. Not having anything to go to. Oh, but I was tutoring, and I was also teaching fitness classes. So I felt like there's some flexibility, but I need to free up some time so I can actually dedicate it to my business in terms of how do I reach out to people? And my initial plan was actually to go into schools, because I'd come up with the lessons, I'd come up with a program. I knew it'd work because I've been trialing it at my school. And yes, I went down from 4 days, I think from 5 days to 3 days. I think I took down 2 days. So that was 2016. I want to say it was 2016. But it was really scary. And I remember speaking to the secretaries. And I mean, okay, teaching, we know, is not the highest paid position.
It should be.
Oh, it should be. Oh, 100%. 100% should be. But I remember going to secretaries being like, okay, well, if I go down to 4 days, what's the pay? If I go to, I'm like, ugh. And I remember speaking to my husband, but I also had built up quite a good casebook of after school tuition. Right. So my days were crazy because I would literally get up at 5. I'd go to gym, not every day, but 2 days out of those, I'd be at gym. I'd cover a class from 7 to 8. I'd finish the class 5 minutes before so I can jump into the shower so that I could get to school, teach at school. And then I'd have my after-school tuition kids that I had about 2 or 3 in the evening, depending on how many there were. And so I felt like I need, because obviously like you're building up that safety net. I'm like, okay, I can do with this, but at least I know the commitments of school aren't on my back. This is off on my back. So if I need to drop a class, if I need to, remove a client, not work with a client anymore, tutoring client, that's going to be easier to do than a head teacher on my back and where are the results, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I think it was really scary. Yeah. I think that is this going to work? Where's the work going to come from? But then it so happens, because I do feel like we are always supported in one way or like the opportunities are there, but we do need to also make those opportunities happen, One of my head teacher put me in touch with another head teacher, and she asked me to come and deliver a workshop for the head teachers of the borough around stress management. And I was like, okay, well, let's do that. That was really scary. But it worked really well. And from that, she was a connection that got me into her school. So I started working with the kids. And my deputy head teacher had left in the meantime, and she took on headship at a school in Uxbridge. So basically my first teaching Power Thoughts position, where I'd go in once a week, was with her for a good 3 years. Mm-hmm. And she was the one that actually got me into the coaching, PE coaching, as so to say. Right. So that was roughly about then, but it was still, so I'd go to school, deliver Power Thoughts, but then I'm back at my school doing my, 9 to 5 and still tutoring. And I think 2017, I then decided, I was still at school 3 days, I decided, let me go down to 2 days. And then I left at the end of that academic year. And that still felt quite scary, because I think it's not that I had some additional work come in. Yeah, sure. But it was still very much a juggle of doing some cover classes, doing some tuition, and then doing Power Thoughts. That was quite scary.
I'm glad you did it.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sure you are as well. I think it's one of those things where we don't quite know what. I wonder if it felt like this for you. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, it was almost like the fitness thing for me was, I know, like you said, I know this isn't what I'm going to be doing forever. Yeah. I know the fitness is, I'm not going to be a PT at 60. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Yeah. I'm sure there are people who are doing that. But I just felt it wasn't me. But that intuition was telling me that's the direction to go in. Just take that road. Yeah. And see where it ends up. Yeah. Right. And I think if we go back to advice that was probably given 20, 30 years ago. That's crazy talk, right? It's like, why? Come on, like you need to know. You need to know
Yes.
what you're going to do. This. So when I ask that question, what are you going to be doing in 5 years' time? So I have no idea.
Oh, I don't like that question. I really don't like that question. It puts a panic attack.
I know roughly. I can give you a vision of where I want to be and what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
But exactly, like, it's so for me, I knew it was the right direction, and that was kind of when I accepted that. Do you know what? It's okay not to have this structured path in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is life, right? We go through life, you go to school, you go to primary school, you go to high school, you go to college, you go to university. It's like there's this structure in life, and then you get a job, and then you go into management. Like there's everywhere we look, there's a structure.
Yeah.
And we almost, I feel like we are tricked or trapped into thinking that that's the only way.
I know. And that's the thing. And I think, who says it's got to be this way? And I think that question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That stresses me out, because I also think, like, 5 years ago, I did not see myself doing what I'm doing today.
Right.
Like, and thinking, okay, Power Thoughts has kind of been in business now for 5 years. So, but the vision I had for it is so different to what I'm doing today. And like you, I've got an idea of obviously where I'd like to be and those sort of benchmarks that I have, but your intuition just has a different, and it goes back to those, and that's actually what Lucy always said to me. She's like, follow the breadcrumbs, follow the breadcrumbs. Like, what's that next thing? What's that? And you just go for that. But yeah, it is. I think it is for me as well. Like safe, in security, some people can quit their job, and that not having that safety net is what is like the fuel. For me, that's like panic. I'm like, and I guess, and my husband as well, he's been incredibly supportive, but he's very secure and wants a plan. And okay, what's the plan going to be? And I don't know what the plan is. I just have to follow my breadcrumb, I mean, I've not said that to him, but it's, and I think it's, I think it's, but there's also that comes that point where if not now, then when? And I just always remember thinking, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? And I guess for me, I was like, okay, well, worst case scenario, I can go back to teaching. I'm not going to love it, but and that's supposed to the good thing about teaching is you can get a job anywhere. And I mean, even now on my dark days, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to make this work? I'm like, well, there's so many options in terms of how you can use your skills. And I do want to say, and that's the one thing that I was only realized much later on, I think as a teacher, and I'm not saying all teachers are like this, absolutely not, but I've got a close circle of teacher friends, and we've had these chats before around there are so many things that you can do, and you're so skilled in so many things as a teacher, but we don't recognize it all the time. But the amount of skills that you have, it's not easy. It's not easy to come by.
I'm in awe of teachers. I really am, especially having now been a father and sending your child to school and seeing what the teachers have to deal with. You're right. It's such a multitude of skills that you have to, you got to be a psychologist, a motivator, a parent, a carer, a teacher, a coach, a best friend, all of these roles that you have to play for the well-being of the little one. So I totally agree with you. I think there is so much diversity, so much talent in that teaching pool. And I feel like people are not realizing it. And this is, again, no fault of anyone's, but it's just the way the system is, isn't it? It's the salaries, it's the way that it works, it's the pressures on teachers. I think there's this impression about teachers having a cushy life. Right?
Oh, yeah. I was one to say, so you just play all day. And I was like, what? I was like, we do not play all day. That's the last thing we do. But I do think it was that, like, if I don't make this jump now, then when do I do it? And thinking, okay, well, the worst case is I can go back. I'll find something else. Like, I've proven to myself I can find something. Like, I'll make it happen. Sorry, I forgot your initial question there.
That's okay. I was just saying, I've forgotten as well, but it's about teacher skills. Teacher skills.
Yeah.
There is a lot of skills within teaching. And I think because of the way that the pressures of the system, the pressures of the way that it's set up, it's hard for teachers to realise that because they're overworked, they're overwhelmed, and there's burnout. I mean, I've spoken to Sam of Teach Strong. I don't know if you know Sam, but they do a lot of work with helping with lifestyle and food and stress to help teaching staff, and they talk about it a lot, and it's something I think is getting better, but it's still a long way.
It's still a long way. It's still a long way, definitely.
Yeah. So look, let's talk about Power Thoughts, because that's really what you're all about. So give us a snapshot of where Power Thoughts is today. How would you describe? Someone came to us, Natalie, I'm sure you've had this question. What do you do?
Oh God! What do I do?
How do you describe what you do?
Well, initially, Power Thoughts is a coaching and educational service that I put together to ultimately help children recognize that they don't have to believe every thought they think or respond to everything they feel. And that's slowly growing. Obviously, I don't just work with children. I work with parents as well, because it starts with us as the grown-ups. And I think where my work has slowly started to shift into is supporting parents as much as children, because inside all of us is an inner child and a little boy, a little girl that didn't get all of these tools and teachings, and no finger pointing to our parents or caregivers at all. But parenting has changed so much over the generations, and the world has changed. And what we know about the brain and about emotions and looking after our mental health has changed so much. So I often say, to parents, we're almost like this generation, we're kind of like toddlers, because we are trying to figure out how to look after our own mental health. We're learning about how important that is, about working through our big feelings. But now we want to help our kids. So you're learning as much as what your children are. And I think for me, it was because I was growing up, I was quite anxious. I was a worrier. I remember my mum sent me to psychologist when I was about the age of 10. I was then diagnosed with anxiety in my teens and into my 20s as well. And I mean, it's definitely, there's an underlying, she's there. But I think had I had the tools as a child to be like, I don't have to believe this thought I'm thinking right now, and it's just a thought, and have some strategies, and have my parents have these strategies as well, that would have just made such a difference, I guess, in terms of how I approach things. And, equally my parents too, because I can see, warriors on both sides, So and if I just think, okay, well, if I trace that back, I can understand how that comes to play. And so now Power Thoughts is, I still offer workshops in schools. And do a lot of private coaching with children, and then parent coaching sessions as well, with coaching and strategy sessions, and workshops in the corporate sector or parent workshops. And it's a lot of fun. It
sounds like it. I'm interested to know, are you working with parents and children together? Are you working with just children or just parents, or a combination of all of those?
So either sessions with children, and then I'll do a debrief with parents.
Right.
Or some parents come to me and they want me to help them so they can help their children. So I'll have my parent sessions with them. Initially, it did start off with me coaching children, and then I do a 10-minute debrief with parents about what we've covered in the session and here are the tools. But that I always found would slip over into 20 minutes because I'm giving them so much more. And that sort of made me realize, hold on, I actually need solo sessions, or packages with parents independently, because they need this education as much as if not even more so than their kids, because we've got to model it. It's about me learning these tools, me applying these tools and strategies, how to have those conversations with my child. That's come in the last year where I focused a lot more on that.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you might have better insight into this, but if someone says you should get a coach for your child,
I know.
It's like there must be a reaction of, why would you do that? Leave the child alone, right? There's that. So why is this important? Why would someone need a coach for the child? Who would who would benefit from this, I guess, is the question.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and I think there was there was once, life coach for a 4-year-old, which. I mean, going back, I don't like the term life coach. I've always never liked it because I'm like, this makes sense. But to me, personally, But I think it's about looking after our mental health and our emotional well-being. It's about learning not to suppress or dismiss or deny the uncomfortable feelings like the anger, the sadness, the anxiety. It's about learning how to work with them and through them in a healthy way. It's about learning not to believe your thoughts. So when children are doing a maths problem, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm rubbish, I'm a failure, I'm never going to get this right. These are things I hear all the time. And beginning to gain an awareness of those thoughts and recognizing, hold on, here are some things, I can become a thought detective. Let me look for clues and evidence to prove that thought's not true. Understanding how my thoughts and the story I tell myself influences how I feel, influences how I show up in the world and how I behave. So if I'm telling myself the story, nobody likes me because Sally said I'm dumb, and I now keep telling myself that story, that's going to make me feel disempowered, lonely, sad. Therefore, maybe I don't want to go to school. I'm anxious. So giving them those tools and insights to see, actually, don't have to believe that. And here are some tools and strategies that we can do to build your confidence, to see that's not a story you have to pay attention to. Big one as well is understanding that our brain grows and gets stronger when we make mistakes and when we do those things that feel hard. So because I get 10 out of 10 in everything, amazing. But we want to not be getting 10 out of 10. And it's got to feel difficult. Obviously not all the time, but our brain grows and gets stronger because it's like a muscle, just like all the other muscles in our body. And I see so many children. When I started to kind of put the ideas of power thoughts together, I did not an assessment, but like a questionnaire at school. And so many of the kids came back and said, I'm afraid of making mistakes. I hate myself because I make mistakes. I'm so dumb. I'm so stupid. I feel like I'm a tortoise stuck in a shell, was one of the, bless her, little phrases that one of the girls had said. And I see this time and time again that kids are afraid of making mistakes, or they give up too soon, or they think they can't. They start to create a story about why they can't do something because it feels hard, because it feels difficult. And granted, we're not, our talents, DNA, all of that also has a role to play. We might not be the maestro playing piano, but just understanding that actually that hard process isn't a sign that we should give up initially. I mean, there is an element of burnout, right? But it's a sign of actually, this means my brain's growing, and let me try again. Let me take a break. Let me come back. What other things I can do? And overall, just tools to look after our mental health. So as I say, and it's the thing, it's so interesting because if you want to play tennis, you get a tennis coach. If you want to play chess, you get a chess coach. Why aren't we doing that for our mental health? Now, and granted, families, can definitely set this up. They don't need me. I'm not saying that I'm there for everybody, but I do feel it's the same as, and I was actually having a conversation going a bit in tangent, but the same as relationships. We don't get taught how to actually be in a relationship. You behave in your relationship with your significant other based on your previous conditioning, what you've seen, what you've witnessed, your experiences. And what we see in society, which we know is not the right, it's all like sunshine, rainbows and unicorns. But it's a real skill to be in a relationship, to negotiate, to listen, to compromise, to communicate, to argue. But we don't get taught that. And I see that, and same as like with financial coaching. I mean, now there's a lot more around financial education. So I think this is no different. And these are just tools to help us look after our mental health. So yeah, I think that's where I come from. I'll be honest, I do struggle to know what to call myself because I'm not a psychologist or a therapist.
Right.
And coaching, as much as I love coaching, it can also have it's got a bit of a different feel to the word sometimes, I think. But yeah, for me, it always comes just down to, emotional and mental health.
I mean, some of those things you said there, a lot of those things, I've just realised those in the last few years myself. So, I mean, absolutely can see the value on that. And this is the thing, right? I think you said something right at the beginning there, was that when we learn to accept that we don't have to listen to our thoughts, that's not the narrative, that's not reality. Like I said, I've only just realised that, right? Yeah. I've only just realised that. And I look back and I think, just like you, I've looked at my family and said, okay, I can see where that little bit of that worrying, that anxiety comes from, and you kind of trace it. But absolutely, that's valuable for kids. And I think you're right. Often when this generation of parents are going through their own awakening and their own realization of, oh, actually, this is why I think this way. This is why these things have been happening to me. This is why, and we start to try and work through that ourselves. I can't do it on my own. No. I've been talking to people. I've had coaching. I've had, spoken to therapists. I've gone on the internet. I listen to podcasts, and still it's not perfect. Yeah. So I think having someone to just step in when a parent's trying to deal with it themselves. What my experience with this has been, as a parent anyway, it's been, I do things naturally and then I realize, and it's almost like I'm trying to undo them. Yeah. It's like, I didn't realize that me behaving this way or doing these things. And it's when you start seeing it in your daughter, when you start seeing, oh my God, that's what I say. Yeah. Or, oh my God, that's me. That's when you realize, that how much of an influence we have on the children around us. Yeah, definitely. And I will also say, like, there is no perfect. No. And you will get it wrong, as so to say, or not do it the way that you want to do. And I think it's just, and I say this to all parents I work with, it's just you are learning. We talk about raising our kids, but you're raising yourself as well. Yeah. And I think that's what we have to remember. I'm just learning these tools alongside with you, and also understanding, how our brain is wired versus to their brain. It's very, very different. They're still growing, they're still developing. But all these are just additional tools. And I also say to parents, because I sometimes have this thing with like, oh, you're the parent expert. I'm like, I'm not. This is just my opinion, my tools, my experience, what I've learned. You still are the expert of your child. That gut feeling, again, nothing messes with that. Sure. These are just additional tools, and some will work and some won't. And it's that extra kind of insight, that outside perspective that somebody can give you that you can't have when you're so in the situation. But it's all about, it's just learning and growth. That's all it is, It's like muscle. You're just growing and developing it every day. Yeah. And a lot of our behaviours, as we know, are from our parents. So it's natural that when you become a parent, when I become a parent, you just default to what your parents did. And, and it comes a stage where I look back and I thought, and this is not a derogatory statement towards my parents at all. I love my parents and they've been amazing at raising me, and they did the best job that they could with what they had at the time. Yeah. I accept that now. However, there was a stage where I think, actually, do you know what? Maybe the way they did things wasn't the right way. And maybe that is why I'm experiencing certain things that I am now. What can I do to change that for my daughter? And like I said, that it's not easy. And this is where I think having, the help of someone like yourself, or even just the information that's widely available, reading books, listening to podcasts, that's really helped me to understand how it's helped me to understand my behaviors more. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's helped me to understand me a little bit more. And that then helps me to understand, well, what is the kind of person I want to become? Yeah. And I think something you touched on there about thoughts, about, that it's that self-deprecation. It's like, oh, I'm rubbish, I'm useless, I can't do this. It's going back to the self-compassion, isn't it? It's like, it's just teaching. I've only the last few years, I've realized that is the key, right? It's if we can be nicer to ourselves, if we can frame things differently, it's so powerful. And I'll just use an example with Liliana, bless her, she was sick yesterday. And I think this came from her mum. I think when I said to her, I was, it's not nice when you're sick, is it? She goes, Daddy, I'm not sick. I'm just a little bit unwell. Oh. And I was like, yes. So I'm sure that was her mum that said that to her yesterday when she picked her up from school. I was like, yes, you're right. You are just a little bit unwell. Yeah. And she started to turn these things around, with the things that she was doing. She was doing something the other day and she did that. She's like, I can't do this, Daddy. Oh. And I was like, you can't do it or you can't do it yet.
Yeah, I love that word. Love it, love it, love it.
And she's kind of always like, and I was like, well, look, and I explained to her about, I do all the editing and the photography. And I was like, Daddy, once upon a time, I didn't know how to do a podcast. And I said, well, I just didn't know how to do it yet.
Yeah.
And now I figured it out.
Yeah.
And she goes, how did you figure it out? I said, well, I just watched and I read. And she goes, you watch YouTube? I said, yeah, I watch YouTube. And yeah, she watches YouTube. But starting to see her talk in that way and starting to recognize it a little bit. One of the other things that we've started doing with her, which I think is amazing, and I feel like it's hard to measure these things, but these daily affirmations.
Yes.
These positive affirmations.
Yeah.
So there was a period recently where she was struggling with sleep, and she was waking up in the middle of the night. She was wet in the bed, there's a phase they go through. And so now, before she goes to bed, we have our story, and she's got a little 3 or 4 affirmations. Says, I will go to sleep. I am gonna stay asleep. If I need to go for a wee, I'll wake up in the middle of the night. These little things, and then on her own, this is the magic of it, right? This week, she's been doing this for about a month now.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, when I put her to bed, I was like, you can do your affirmations now. And she did her normal affirmations. Then she started adding them, adding her own ones.
Oh, I love that. Oh.
And yesterday's one, she was like, Daddy, I want to add something. I was like, okay, cool. What are you going to add? And she goes, I am happy.
Oh.
And I was just like, I know, yeah. I was just like, and I asked Anisha, I said, did you tell her to say that? She was like, that just came from herself.
Yeah.
So I think those little, just small things, like you said, if I had a way when I was that age to deal with emotions, and I went through bullying and all these sorts of things that kids go through. We all go through different phases, but you're right, we don't have a framework.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, getting a coach, getting a teacher, whatever it is, to do these things. Even without those things, people are doing things for their health on a day-to-day basis. So I always use the example of brushing your teeth.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
And I always ask people, why do you brush your teeth? Let me ask you, Natalie, why do you brush your teeth?
And not to have stinky breath.
To not have
clean teeth. And no holes in my teeth.
Okay, so and I always say this, if I don't brush my teeth today, will I wake up tomorrow with terrible teeth?
No.
Yeah, I'll wake up with a stinky mouth.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be that nice, and it's going to feel a bit gunky. But I'm not going to have major tooth problems tomorrow. And even if I went tomorrow and I didn't brush my teeth, the following day I'll still be okay.
Yeah.
But yet we brush our teeth every day.
Yeah.
So why do we brush our teeth? Well, we brush our teeth to stop ourselves in the future from having problems.
Yeah.
Now, then I come back to say, well, could you live without your teeth?
Yeah. No. Well, yeah.
You survive.
You could survive.
You survive. You're not going to die, right?
Really bad.
My grand's had no teeth for a couple of decades.
But yeah, you'd survive.
You'd survive. But yeah, we spend 2 minutes, 4 minutes, twice a day taking care of them. Yeah. You can live without them. What about this?
Yeah. And that's the thing.
What about the mind that you rely on every single day to help you to make decisions and guide you through life?
Yeah.
What's the equivalent of brushing your teeth for your mind? Now, it's not that we're saying we're waking up every day with a broken mind, with mental health issues, right?
Yeah.
But what are we doing to prevent these things happening in the future?
Yeah.
And I think having strategies like whether it's affirmations, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's coaching or something to help people frame things, I think it's so crucial.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because I think where I had gotten to, I'm just thinking back to when I was really miserable and unhappy with the anxiety, like it was a physical, like and I still sometimes know, but I now know what it is. So when I get it, I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel great, but I know it's going to pass. Let it out, go all my stuff. It's fine. But I think a lot of that, I'm not saying could have not been prevented, but had I had tools earlier on, would have made such a difference in terms of, and also, neuroplasticity. We know, why kids' brains are so malleable. Yes, it's just as for us, but it's harder for us. So if you're thinking about 20 plus years of that consistent and anxious, habitual way of thinking, that is so much easier to kind of form and mold with kids. Not in all cases, of course, not in all cases. I'm not, a neuroscientist to that,
Sure.
at all, but But just that the modeling, the education, the understanding, the awareness. I was not aware of my thoughts until, when I started this stuff. And yes, when I was doing my psychology as well, but not to the degree. I never thought about it in this way.
Sure.
And then I don't have to believe that stuff. Like, don't have to believe it. Like when somebody said in a certain way, I was like, the penny just dropped. And I think we're all going to have negative thoughts. We're all going to have self-doubt, but and I think, it's recognize that awareness of, because your mindset, I'm going off on a tangent, but when you're going back there to like your mind is there, like this is what drives you every day. And we know the difference that a negative thought or a spiraling thought can have. And I mean, some people have got a bigger buffer than others. I know definitely my husband's a lot more like, no, he's a lot more happy-go-lucky. But it's really hard when you're caught up in that negative space and you physically, energetically, it pulls you down. And I think from such a young age, being able to have those tools and strategies just makes all, it's not going to stop everything, but you're going to have the tools. And this is also not about sugar, like cotton wooling kids. And like, it's actually no, give them the challenges, give them the setbacks, let them be disappointed, let them be rejected.
Yeah.
But this is how we bounce back from it when they're ready, And it's not about denying those feelings either. It's like, okay, do you know what? This feels really rubbish. And we're just going to sit here with this rubbish feeling for a bit. Yeah. Like, that's okay too. Let's process that feeling. It's nothing to be afraid of.
It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah. But then there also comes a point of, okay, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to let this keep me down, or am I going to learn from it? Am I going to come back from that? Yeah. And I think that's what this is.
Self-compassion. I mean, that's
yes.
That's just a classic definition.
Yeah. It's self-compassion.
I've got it written up on the board there. I should know, but off the top of my head, but I'm looking at it. Awareness of suffering, right?
Yeah.
Become aware of your suffering.
Yeah.
Sit with it. Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Then there's the agreement in the meaning, which is the common human experience. It might be difficult for children,
yeah.
but everyone goes through. Hey, I say that to Liliana. Hey, I think like that sometimes as well. It's just that commonality is agreement in the meaning, and then take action to relieve the suffering.
Yeah.
What can I do to help me come out of this?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I do. So we, we create feeling characters, and we've got the feeling for sadness, with feeling for anger. I mean, one of the boys I worked with, his angry feelings were getting quite big, and so he called his tornado. But it was I thought it was brilliant. And Mum's like, oh, it really helped. Not all cases, but in some cases, she's like, oh, it looks like we got a visitor today. Like, tornado's here. What should we tell Tornado? What's he feeling? But that gave just so much awareness of like, yeah, actually, I'm feeling angry, and where do I feel it in my body? And I think that's the other thing as well that I definitely do with the anxieties. Like, we can push and resist, but it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And actually, if you just sit with it, as uncomfortable as it feels, and I actually did this not too long ago. I don't know, I'd woken up and I just felt incredibly anxious for no reason at all. And I just thought, you know what, let me just set my timer for 10 minutes and I'm just going to lie here. And I put on some like meditation music. I'm like, I'm just going to lean into this feeling. And I'll be honest with you, it was the best experience I had coming out of it. Like, and I was like, I really need to do this more. When you just allow, and I appreciate not everybody, like, I know not my tolerance level, so I felt safe to do that. But to me, I was like, actually, do you know what? Just actually allowing it to be there for a bit and not fight it does work. I was like, I really need to do this more.
It's mindfulness, isn't it?
It is.
It's being in the present moment.
Yeah.
And if your present moment is one of not feeling unease, feeling anxiety, feeling sad, angry, whatever those emotions are, let's become aware of it without judgment, without being judgmental, right? Without saying, I shouldn't be feeling that way. And I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's almost, it's a cultural thing. This is how things were in the past, but it's like, look to the next thing, right? Yeah. Where's the snap out of it and think about that, or how can I not feel this way? And it's almost ignoring it. And I think what happens, and again, my experience of ignoring it for so many years and just brushing it under the carpet. Well, if you keep brushing dirt under the carpet, well, in a few years you're gonna have some problems down there, aren't you?
Definitely.
So I think that's been the culture, is like, well, just don't. You shouldn't feel this way, so let's move on to the next thing. And you're right, if we just sit with it and just allow yourself to be, which is hard.
It is hard. No. And it's not always, I do find, and I mean, the other way, movement, I think, movement is really powerful. So if you can't sit with it, try and move it. So, you know, I do teach kids something called move it to lose it, where we move our body in a safe way. You know, when we talk about safe, like in terms of the angry feelings can sometimes be unsafe, where we want to hit out or punch our brother, but move my body in a safe way to let go of that feeling. And I mean, that works really good as well. But again, you're allowing the space for it to be there.
Sure.
And working through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you were the one that told me this off another time we spoke about giving the emotions a name and the characters.
The characters,
so
yes.
For us, she likes kind of, I don't know what you call this, but when the two letters begin with the same, so Angry Annie.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
Or Sad Susan, or so I started doing that with her, and at first, and one day she was really angry, and I was like, what I said, and I gave a character to I can't remember, Angry Andy or something like that. And I said, when I get angry, this guy called Andy, he comes along.
Love
his
that.
name's Angry Andy. I said, what's yours called?
Yeah.
I think she said Angry Annie or something like that. And she was a bit shy at first, but then by doing that, she was able to sit with it.
Yeah.
And then I said, you know what I'd like to do sometimes when Angry Andy comes? And she's like, what? I said, I like to go into my room, I close the door, I put the music on really loud, and I just stamp my feet, or I have a real, I put on really loud dance music and just
love it.
Shake it out.
Love it.
And then a couple of times, I noticed her leaving, like randomly we'd be doing something. She'd just leave the room. She'd go upstairs and I'd hear banging.
Oh.
And she'd stamp her feet and then she'd come back down. And she goes, Daddy, I went to stamp my feet. Like you told me. I was like, how do you feel? And she's like, yeah, I feel better.
Oh, love that.
So look, this is all new things that we're starting. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but this has come as a realization for me that what we do matters. It matters a lot. And this is a terrible way of thinking about it, but I feel like with the second child coming, I've got a second chance, like to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, I can start again. Like I know it's a terrible thing to say, but it's like, if I'd known this 5 years ago when she was born, and look, it's probably going to be very different to what I think it's going to be anyway. But I feel like I'm more prepared with the right mindset and the right tools to help not only the child, but also now with Liliana, her emotions, and I spoke to you about this off air, didn't I? Her feeling a little bit of this, her space is being taken away. So that's an interesting state of affairs for us at the moment.
But listen, it's all growing as well, and with your new little one coming along too, you're gonna be like, nobody told me about this.
So boys are different to girls. So what happened? What do
I do with this? So I do think it is, but I do think. Just even, and I think what's so important here, and this is, what I want to share with parents, where your learning comes in, is because when you're modeling that, so you keep talking about Angry Andy, and then, I don't know, Sad Sarah, whenever that happens, or Nervous Nelly, you could make a whole alphabet here. When you're modeling that, she sees that. And that's no pressure there, but that's the hard thing. But also having a lot of compassion for yourself when you don't do it the way you want to. And I think what's really, really important, and that does so well in terms of repairing that relationship, is when you haven't behaved the way that you wanted to, just go back and apologize.
Yeah.
And I think that's so, and if I think about it, that wasn't really the done thing when we were kids. It's like, but they just don't get anything wrong. But I think there's so much do you know what? Mummy messed up there. Daddy messed up. I got angry and I got upset, and actually I should have said it in a different way or done something different. You're modeling to them what you want them to do, and you're also helping them understand what's gone on for them, what's gone on for you. Because we often talk about the feelings that hide under the angry mask. And, it was often, if I work with children that really do struggle with, find anger difficult to navigate. Underneath that, it's disappointment, frustration, embarrassment, confusion, fear. It's fear, and actually understanding, Daddy got angry there because he was feeling really frustrated or disappointed. But now I understand it had nothing to do with me, because that's the other thing as well. And I think when we're having these open conversations with them, obviously in a child-friendly manner, I think that, that's also where we're doing so much good in terms of building that relationship and deepening their awareness.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And one of the things someone mentioned this to me years ago before I had a child, but I noticed when they were speaking to their child, they were speaking to them like an adult.
Mm.
And I found that really interesting because most people speak to their children like their children.
Yeah.
Right. And I tried that with Leanna and just tried, not in a, not in a harsh, how it's very, as a PT, like, doing a temperature, but just, she asked the question where the answer was really complicated. And I was like, I'm just going to tell her anyway. I can't remember what it was. It was something about the sun or, some sciencey question. And I just gave her the answer. And she probably didn't understand it all, but she was like, oh, okay. And she just accepted it.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then I started doing this a bit more, just talking to her like if someone else was like, rather than, oh, well, this, like, I just
told her.
Just had a conversation.
Here it is.
this is what it's about. And she just was like, oh, okay. Another example, right? And this, I'm going to claim this as my top tip for parents.
Yeah.
I don't have many, but
I love it.
I don't have many, but I have one. It's completely off tangent. But I never had the conversation with my parents about the birds and the bees.
Yeah. Yeah.
It never happened. Right?
Oh, God.
So I think I've found a solution. So we watch a lot of nature documentaries. David Attenborough is like, we call him David Dada, granddad in Gujarati. So we call him David Dada. So his granddad, David. And there was one recently which was about the babies, like, so the babies. And they'll say they do mating. There's the animals mating. And it was happening. And she's like, what's going on? Why are they fighting? And I'm like, so well, they're not. And I just told her, I was like, well, she was like 2 or 3. I mean, I was like, well, they're making babies. And she's like, oh, why are they doing that? And I was like, well, the boy has a seed and the girl has an egg. And I was just explaining the science behind it. And now she gets it.
Yeah.
And now we're watching one the other day. She goes, oh, Daddy, they're mating. They're making a baby. I'm like, now you get it. And then she asked one, she goes, is that how people make babies? and it's hard to laugh. And I just went, yeah, that's exactly how it's done.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't make up a story about, the tooth fairy or the egg or this or that, like it was a magic. And she just gets it. So I think when there's so much power in talking to them like they're just an adult. And I think that for me has been a big, big shift because she then asks, so now she's 4 or 5, but she then asks follow-up intelligent questions because there's that natural inquisitive mind. And I think when I was a kid, that natural curiosity that we have, I felt like it was blunted out of me. It was just like, why? Oh, why? Yeah, kids naturally. Why is this that? Why is this? And I was just, because it's this way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I said so.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Why do I have to do this, Daddy?
Yeah.
Because I said so.
Yeah.
Right? And with her, it's like, why do I have to do this? And I was like, well, okay, why do you have to brush? It was a brushing teeth. Why do I have to brush my teeth twice a day? If you don't brush your teeth twice a day, this is what happens. Just explain it.
Yeah.
Why do you exercise every day, Daddy?
Yeah.
I explain it.
Yeah. And I do think keeping those around those difficult conversations as well, which can be quite, I think, with like, it's like, oh, we wasn't talking about, no, we weren't allowed to talk about these things and so forth. And I think there's so much power in having those open conversations with her about it when she's got the questions. And I think just, if parents are struggling in terms of it's a difficult conversation that comes like a difficult topic, I always say, first ask questions. Don't fix it first. So just ask the question, what makes you think that? Tell me more. What do you think about it? How do you feel about it? And then start giving those, like what you did, giving those and using the right words as well, because not to kind of take this off on a tangent here, but when children are taught the nice, the pretty words for all their private parts and they don't use the correct terminology, it doesn't help later on because it's like, oh, I can't really talk about this, shouldn't be talking about it. And they actually really need to know what it be able to be able to talk about it, because I think there was a case. I had to do something with, I was on a panel around consent, and one of the speakers mentioned, there was a case in terms of not using the correct terminology. The teacher didn't know what biscuit was. Right. So when this child said, so-and-so's touched my biscuit, she didn't have a clue what it meant. And actually, and I think that's really important in terms of having those open conversations. So I think we went off a tangent there.
That's
anyway.
Okay. That's okay. No, it's just when you were saying about the talking to children, the way that you talk to them, it's so important. It matters so much. And you're right. And you said, we know this, right? That they'll do what you do, not what you say. And yeah, Anisha's been great with ever since Lily was a baby. She'd have her on the yoga mat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just sitting there while she'll do her yoga. And, now we'll do some stretching in the evening. And at first I was like, come on, Lily, let's do this.
Yeah.
And she was not really into it. And I'm like, why does she not want to do what we're doing? And then I just thought, well, just carry on doing it. And then now, without even saying anything, we'll just do our stretching. And then if she's around, she'll come and she'll do her own little thing. And, she'll do a down dog and all these little things. So
I love that.
she just does it on her own. And whether that's going to carry on, I've got to not have the expectation, right? At first, like any parent, it's like, wow, I know about health, and my child's going to eat 5 a day, and they're going to drink their water, and they're going to do all of these things. No, I'm going to do the best I can to model that behavior, and whatever she picks up.
Yeah, because she is her own little person on her own little path, I think that can sometimes be difficult to take on board, I think, and to remember, because we can only do what we can do and guide and coach and teach the best that we can, but just like you're your own person on your own path. And I think but it's a lesson for us as well.
It is, but it's also giving them a little bit of freedom in making their own choices, right? Because I feel like, again, I can only relate this to my own experience as a child. I felt like everything was dictated to me. Right, I felt like life was dictated to me. It's like, you're going to go here, you're going to do that. This person's going to look after you. That person's going to look after you. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't step. It was almost like whatever I wanted to do, I wasn't able to do. And I feel like, looking back, that was probably the reason when I got to my teenage years, I did what I did, right? And then that's a different conversation. I'm not going to get into that now. But it's true. Whereas if you have a sense of freedom of like, what do you want to do today? Right? It's like today she's not at school because she was not feeling on very well. Yesterday she woke up late. I was like, okay, what do you want to do today?
Yeah.
Rather than, you're going to do this. And we've recently gotten out riding bicycles, and I take her for a bike ride. And, she's actually with her helmet on, she's on the road, and she's really safe. And we've been riding around, and the last few times I've been out, she's like, which way, Daddy? I'm like, you choose.
Yeah.
And she gets so excited. I get to dictate which way we go. Like, you lead in front, I'll follow you, and you choose which way to go. And just, I can see the glint in her eye. I can see how it's like, I get to do it.
Yes.
I think giving them that empowerment that I can actually choose and I can actually do what I want to do. Like you said, they're their own little person, their own little personality. As much as I want them to be, not like me, definitely not, but I want them to be a certain way and do certain things and have certain behaviors and traits. She's going to be who she wants to be.
Yeah, and I do think, look, boundaries and like regulations are important in terms of like, it gives safety and structure, right? But I always say, like, so much is dictated to them, but how do we then exercise the muscle of thinking for myself, of maybe making the wrong choice, but then bumping my head and learning from that? And I think, and especially like when I work with parents who've got kids that are very strong-willed and don't like to be told what to do, a lot more goes, you get a lot, not all the time, of course, but bringing them in. So, do you know what? I noticed we've got this problem, or this is happening, and I noticed this, like completely non-judgmental, neutral. How do you think we can solve the problem? And the amount of times that I've actually also used it with kids come up with brilliant examples. So actually there was a girl that I worked with who was really worried, struggled to go to sleep, and she was in Hong Kong. And I think they had a lot of riots around that time as well. So she was really worried about like, people are going to break in, blah, 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 all these things. And parents are trying to give her different strategies, different things. And the one day I just sat with her and I'm like, spoke through the challenges, what's difficult. I'm like, how do you think we can solve this? What's going to help? And she was like, I think I want to listen to a podcast. I've got these podcasts that I like to go to sleep, like that I like to listen to. And Mum emailed me, like, whenever it was a few days later, and she's like, it's working. She's now going to sleep. Now, I mean, that's a minor example. Sure. But I think sometimes because we're the adult, and of course we do know better because we've got our lived experience and we can foresee things. But they sometimes have got really good answers. And I think giving that sense of empowerment and that sense of choice, not all the time. I'm not saying boundaries aren't there, and we still have certain rules and regulations to follow to function in society, right? But I think we can do more of that. And I also why I think that's so important is I do work with a lot of children that aren't very confident and that don't know how to speak up for themselves, and then they'd get bullied. I'm not saying this is going to happen to all kids, but they're on the receiving end of being bullied and the receiving end of being picked on. But they've not had the chance to exercise that assertiveness muscle and the ability to say no and the ability to not people please. So the other challenge here is sometimes she's got to say no to you, and that's going to feel really uncomfortable. Obviously, pick your battles, but allowing that as well, because if they're not saying no in a familiar, safe environment, how can we expect them to say no when they really, really need to say no? And, I think that also comes down a lot to people pleasing. And I can see myself so much in that in terms of, and not, my parents did a brilliant job. But I think definitely I was one of those kids, I was too afraid to say, to rock the boat because I wanted to make everyone happy. And I think being given the voice to say no, or what do you think about it? Which way do you think we should go? What do you think we should do? That's life skills there.
That what you just touched on there is such an important one, isn't it? Because I think back, when I was a massive people pleaser, probably am to some extent, still one. Still a
recovering. We're recovering.
We're recovering. Yeah, you never get rid of it, do you? But saying no, and you're right. The first time I suggested something that she maybe in the past wanted to do, she said no. It was like, why do you want to do it? But again, I just take a step back and think, actually, all right, let's not do this today. It's cool. And that's been a big lesson. It's fascinating because this journey with children is just never ending. As you said, the next one's going to come and it's going to be completely different and it's all going to throw up. But the biggest thing for me is I've learned so much from her. And I feel like paying attention to them and just listening, observing, like you said, asking questions. Why do you think that? And then just getting an understanding of how they tick. I've learned so much. I've learned so much, and some of the things, her observations, are amazing. The other day she said about adults all being on their phone all the time. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, guilty. And I try really hard. We have a rule. No phones at the dining table. No screens after 5 p.m. We have all these rules in the house that she's well aware of. I still get caught out. And when she said that, I was like, well, where is she seeing that? Because she goes to school. She doesn't see any adults at school. She comes home and she might see some, the parents. It's us. But then we go to school and in the playground, adults be hanging around and we wait.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, probably in the playground.
She sees that as well. But mostly she probably sees it at home because mummy and daddy are on social media. We have podcasts. We have to go on there. And so she does see it. So I've tried to channel that in a different way, and I get her involved in here. And when I'm editing and creating reels, and I said, look, this is how I do it, and this is what goes on it. And she's, can I put a sticker? And we do all these. So showing her the creative side of it rather than just the consumption side of it. Because I try myself. I made this little kind of affirmation to myself that I am a creator, not a consumer.
Yes.
So by putting that hat on as a creator, it's like, well, I create content, but I don't necessarily have to consume it. Does that make sense? So now I'm trying to show her, well, I like to create things that other people like to watch them. And that for her has helped her because now she's got her own little app on her iPad. And in fact, the other day, I had her sitting exactly where you were. And I was doing some editing there and she was on the iPad. I didn't know what she was doing. And she'd, in like a Word document, but she was doing some scribbles, she figured out how to record her voice.
Oh, wow.
And how to upload a video into the Word document.
I love it.
And she had her headphones on. And I went out of the room and I came back and she was talking like she was doing a podcast. And she had recorded it.
Bless her. She's role-playing now.
She figured it out. And I was like, how did you do that? She goes, I put a video here. She goes, I got some sound here. I recorded you. I didn't know she was recording me while... and I just thought that's brilliant. Like she's creating, she's got a little camera and we go out, we take photos. So
that's brilliant. I love that.
I don't know if that's right? I don't know. I'm just doing what I feel like, well, what's a good way of framing this? Without telling her it's bad, because why am I doing it? Right? And I'll explain to her at some stage the science behind why you should look at screens and all of those things. But just trying to turn it into something where is something's positive. And she's very creative. You see that she loves to draw and art. I mean, all kids are, right? So trying to channel that. And look, she might turn around and one day go, I hate photography, I hate videography. But right now it's something that she's into because I'm into it.
Yeah.
And I'm not forcing it upon her. And I'm just going to see where it naturally takes her.
I think that's brilliant. And you are, because look, and I think I always get questions like, with screen times being bad. But they're here to stay. Screen is here to stay. And I think we have to embrace it. And there's a lot of good and positives that come from it. But it's exactly doing what you've done there in terms of, well, this is actually how I'm using it, and this is why we do it, and you're involving her and you're teaching her. So it's those good aspects of it, and it's that consistent, these are going to be lots of conversations you have with us. There's going to be lots of teaching moments. It's not just this once off and then that's it. You're going to be doing lots of this, and it's instilling it. How do you bring that in and develop a positive or healthy habit with it, which is what you're doing. Because it is here to stay. And I think it is scary because we maybe, myself, didn't grow up with it, and I think maybe older generations, maybe slightly younger, started to grow up. But it's new, and I mean, you got 4 and 5 year olds that know how to do things, and I'm like, well, you teach me how to do this, please. But I think that's brilliant. I think that's actually, you're teaching her, modeling to her how to use it in a healthy way. And that's where the magic lies with all of this, I think. And it's because it's not bad. No. And it's here to stay. And I mean, got to stay 2 steps ahead when she gets older in terms of, but it's all these little conversations, the education around how it's healthy, how we can be with this, but in a healthy way.
I think, like you said, you mentioned the word tools earlier. All of these things that we have in our lives, they're simply tools.
Yeah.
And like with any tool, you can use it in a positive way, or you could use it in a not so positive way, a negative way.
Yeah.
And I think technology, social media, absolutely is that tool. I mean, look at us. We're here because of social media, right?
Exactly. I think it's brilliant.
It can be, all the contacts, the people I've had on the podcast, Ninesh, all the other people I've met, it's all been through social media. And that's a positive.
Definitely.
Right? And that's through me channeling it in a way to find like-minded people, to find people that I want to talk to find people that are interesting. So you're right. And look, there's that whole thing about it's going to be here to stay. It's not only is it going to be here to stay, it's going to dominate our lives in the future. It's going to dominate the future, whether you like it or not.
I know.
And I had this conversation with Anisha because when I met her, she wasn't very tech savvy. Like she's just like, which is fine. Not everyone has to be. But there came a point where I said to her, listen, you kind of have to embrace it.
Yeah.
Because, and this was the kick. I was like, do you want to be 50, 60, 70 and like the 50, 60, 70-year-olds that you see now who don't know how to use a phone? Like, do you want to be that person? It's debilitating, isn't it? Like I see it. Over COVID, we've been doing our sessions remotely, and I see the 78-year-olds struggling to use Zoom and struggling to get on the computer, and that's sad because it's a fundamental part of life now.
Yeah.
And, so I feel like embrace it. Learn how to use it, just understand it. Yeah. So that when it is, when we are much later, you've at least got a basic grounding and understanding. Yeah. And that's my take on it. Yeah. I think it's an important.
No, definitely. I think it's not going to go away. And I think it can, if you think about the positive aspect, like in terms of connection, actual fact, I mean, Fortnite or one of those games, I'm not, I get a bit lost of the words, has a bit of a bad reputation. But, and maybe it's not Fortnite. I don't know which one is like, it wasn't Roblox. I'm sure it was Fortnite.
I think it's Fortnite.
I think it was Fortnite. But a mum said to me, it's been so positive for her son.
Okay.
She said he's coming out of his shell. He is engaging. He's speaking up. He's more confident. They have rules around how he plays. So she has to have the door open. She's got to be able to hear him speak. He's got to be talking. But she said it's really helped build his confidence in terms of building those friendships at school that he necessarily wouldn't have done otherwise. And I think... But it's about the education, and it's about us as the adults staying informed around it. And like you say, even in terms of running a business and like how we saw with COVID, we just had no option. But things that we thought would never be able to take place online are now taking place online. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but I remember thinking, I never would have thought that would have worked online, but it's working online. So yeah, it is about embracing it, but how do we model that in a healthy way, that it's not consuming us? Because I think the downsides of that is, I've definitely experienced it. And I do find that hard. I don't know if you find that hard, but in terms of you're on social media because you need to create, but it's so easy to get lost in the consumption. Oh my goodness. And I don't know about you, but it's almost, I was talking to a friend, I said the other day, it's almost like there's a little switch that goes off when I know I've been scrolling too long. I can literally feel my mood drop. And that's like, oh, we've been on here too long. We've got to put it down.
Yeah, I feel like I literally can feel like my head's been sucked into the screen, and I notice myself. I'll go on and check. I don't know if someone replied to a message that I saw someone sent me a DM the other day, and then you do it. It's habit. Isn't it?
It's just a habit. Oh,
the thumb goes to that home button on the Instagram. You press home, and then before you know it, you're scrolling.
Yeah,
and you're right. You kind of, I do now notice myself kind of going, oh, hold on a minute. I feel like it's almost like that time just went and I'll black out and I've woken up and that's how it feels now.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
It's scary.
When you realize it, it's really scary. And I observe and I watch other people do it now as well.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's just, the whole psychology behind social media and the whole dopamine drive and getting people to behave a certain way. It is worrying, but I feel, again, this is why I feel like staying on top of it.
Yes, exactly.
Being aware of it, putting that mindset on that I'm a creator, not a consumer, helps me to become aware of it. And I still, I'm not perfect, so I slip into it, but it's getting a lot better.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah. So doing this helps me because it's like I've got a reason, I've got a reason. But it's true, I've got a reason to do it. I've got a reason, and I'm not doing this to, I've said this so many times, I'll say it again, I'm not doing this to get the likes and to get the hearts and to get the admiration. I'm doing it because I love it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it because I love sitting down in front of people and speaking to people. Gosh, when I first started my podcast, it was all about face-to-face. It was all about getting in front of people. Then COVID hit. So I didn't do any of that. So now, you're my first, well, actually you're my second, Nilesh was here. And obviously I've had my wife. But getting people in front of me, this almost like feels I'm starting again.
Yeah.
This is why I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
So this is just a way for me to channel so that I get to do things that I enjoy. It's a little bit like what you were saying earlier about following those breadcrumbs.
Yes. And this is your breadcrumb.
This was my breadcrumb. Again, if you said to me 5 years ago when I was still living in Abu Dhabi before Liliana was born, that in 5 years' time you're going to be sitting here in your homemade studio talking to people, interviewing with 50 episodes of a podcast.
Yeah.
I thought, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like, there's no chance.
Yeah. And you see, that's the thing, isn't it?
So now it's gone from producing a podcast to, actually, I quite like being behind the camera and creating for people. And now I've got clients who I'm creating reels and videos and YouTube and blogs and I don't know where this is going to go. Like, you say to me, well, why? I don't know. Do you know what? I'm enjoying it. I'm getting a bit of money. It's like the fitness thing for you, right? It's like, I don't know where it's going to go, but there's something here that my intuition is saying, do this. I'm getting a bit of money for it as well, which is handy, especially when you've got another child coming on the way. And all of these things. I'm like, I'm going to just keep pulling at that string and seeing where it takes me.
Yeah. And that's what I like. It's like sometimes the not knowing, which can feel so scary. But it's also like, well, what's the other way? Because I think our friend Simon had this quote. He said something in terms of, I'm not very good at remembering these things actually, by the way. But he said something like, if there's uncertainty, there's possibility. So in all and the uncertainty, there's like also the opportunity for lots of possibilities. And that resonated with me so much. And that's what I love. Like when things do feel like just sometimes like this, it's just like black or blank. It's like actually, but allow some of that mystery to come into play, and the possibilities.
He says something else as well about how the greatest leaps forward in your life has probably been off the back of the lowest moments, the darkest moments. Again, I'm misquoting him, but he's right, and I look back at he talks about his story, Simon Alexander Ong, if people are wondering who we're talking about. Simon, we're just chatting. His book's just there, I think.
Yeah.
Next to Michaela's. There you go. Michaela's book. Yeah. I haven't read that yet, Michaela. I'm going to read it. So he says about how, and I look back and think he's right. If I look back at the darkest moments in my life. Oh, yeah. After those, and in those moments, if you said to me, this is going to be one of the most pivotal moments in your life, you're going to look back and thank this and thank yourself for this moment. I'll be like, please, just go away. Let me carry on crying. Right?
Definitely.
But I look back and I think, yes, after those moments came the biggest leaps forward in my life, right? So when you're in that period of uncertainty, of course it's hard, right? It's hard if someone's just lost their job to say, no, this is the best thing that's going to ever happen to you, right? It's not, that's not what you want to hear at the time, and it doesn't feel like that. But you're right. In those moments, you just have to know and trust that this is getting a bit spiritual, but I feel like I am getting a bit more spiritual as I'm getting older. But I feel like that by being intentional, by following intuition, by, taking those steps, it's the universe will conspire and things will work themselves out. And I truly, truly believe that now, right? I set off on this journey. Like I said, I said, I would like to do some video filming for some people. And then the opportunity was just there in front of me. Yeah. It's like, and it wasn't like someone came knocking on my door and said, hey, but there was a calling. I was like, oh, maybe that's, and I just kind of pulled on that string.
Exactly.
And here I am, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I can definitely, actually, if I think about it, that's how I took Power Thoughts online. Because I had a client contact me in Australia years ago, who, funny enough, has just come back to me again and wanted me to work with their son again. So we were doing some work with them. It's great. And he was like, oh, we read about you in a paper. And I was like, how did that make it to Australia? But okay, different story. He's like, we'd love you to work with our son. And I was like, how do I do this online? And I'd already had the idea, but because I'd been so, I think as a tutor as well, I'm there in person. How do I do things? I mean, Zoom was completely new to me. We're talking about 5 years ago. And I made it work. And now that's all that I do. And it's and you know what I mean? So there's been so many moments like that. But you do, I feel, need to be open to those opportunities too. You
do. And also I think it's important that you got to be open to the opportunities, and if it doesn't work out, it's okay.
Yeah.
To that.
Yes. Not being attached to it.
That can be that can really throw someone. And it's normal, right? You can think, well, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, it's it's difficult because it depends on the situation the person's in, right? I think, some people have, you have to earn a living, you've got to pay your bills, you've got to pay the mortgage, so you can't just sort of jump from thing to thing. But I think sometimes when you try something and it doesn't work, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think sometimes, Stephen Bartlett talks about this, and that the power is in quitting.
Yeah.
Like the power is in walking away and saying no. And I think back to my career that I walked away from, everyone was telling me you're crazy, including my head, including the logical side of me. The only thing that was telling me do it was my intuition, was my gut. But everyone was telling me you're crazy. You're walking away from, but it was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I'm glad I did as well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I did. And would I go back and change anything? This is the other thing, isn't it? It's about, I remember trying to, when I was younger, thinking, I want to try and live my life without having any regrets. And not having regrets sometimes means I'm going to do that thing. And if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to have regrets, because the regret would have been if I hadn't done that thing.
It, yeah.
Like you said, it's like, now is the time, right?
Yeah.
So if I don't do it now, and I don't end up doing it, is this something later on I'm going to think back,
Well, that's the thing. That's what I feel too. And I was just like, and that's the same. I was like, I cannot not do this.
Right.
Because I'm going to get to a point where, not that I feel it's ever too late, but I might be 80 and not in the best of I'd like to be in a very good, I'm definitely going to be 80 and we're rocking it. But I just think, I don't want to look back and think, oh, I wish I did that. And that's a hard thing sometimes. I think it's, I was just like, no, you just have to give this a go. Yeah. So cheers. Good to us.
Good to us, yeah. So I'm going to ask you that question that I said I wasn't going to ask, or you didn't like being asked, but I'm going to ask you slightly differently. Where's the next breadcrumb? Where's it going?
Do you know what? I have actually been having a bit of a moment the last couple of weeks. Actually, in all full transparency, I had a bit of a meltdown yesterday. I did. Where I was like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. Where's the next step? And bless my husband. He was very, very compassionate and very supportive. And I think you just have those moments. I think definitely, at the moment, I'm trying to figure out how to make the business work for me in a better way. I think my challenge is that I can get all consumed with it. And I know that there's more to Natalie than just power thought. So that's something that and so I think for me, the next step is how do I make it work in a better way, but still have the impact that I can with it. So what that looks like, I'm not 100% sure at the moment. I know my breadcrumbs are definitely, so if I look at what makes me feel good, I think that's the next step. It's like coaching right now. Thank you for this. So the breadcrumbs there are, I love the corporate stuff that I'm doing, workshops with parents. I really get a buzz from it. I enjoy it. And it's not about the feedback, oh, that's so good, but I can see the impact that it's having. And I want more of that. So more group things at the moment. And then also looking at, I think it all comes down to group, because I do miss the energy that you get in a group. And the other aspect as well that has felt really good is being able to kind of challenge and as much as I love working with kids, still work with kids, I love that. But it is being able to spend some proper time with parents and supporting parents, which I'm enjoying that as well. Yeah, so I think those are the breadcrumbs at the moment, and seeing where that takes me. You never know with other opportunities that you don't think of that come my way.
Well, like I just said, it's exciting. You may not feel like it now.
Yeah,
but
it's like
what comes on the other side of that?
What's the plan?
Just embrace the journey.
Exactly.
And have that. And I do believe that we talked about that feeling, right? That feeling that you didn't have when you were teaching, and the feeling that you had when you were doing spin, and the same thing for me. As long as you're getting that feeling, it doesn't have to be every day, right? I'm not going to claim to say I have that feeling every single day, but there are things that we can do. I'll share mine in a moment, but just getting a sense of, this is the right thing. I'm doing. I'm on the right path. Just if we can have a sense of that on a weekly basis, then I think it will help. And I think for me, something I've started doing since the coaching that we went on is keeping a success tracker.
Yeah.
And mine's really simple, right? I do, as everyone knows, my day job is health coach on a diabetes prevention program. So in a day, they're all group sessions. I'll probably speak to anywhere from 50 to 100 people. Wow. So depending on how many groups I have in a day. So all I do now, actually it's over there in my notepad, but I keep a tally. I just keep a checklist of how many people have I spoken to today. That. And at the end of the day, I'll look back and I'll tot up the numbers and I'll write down a number. So 85. And then I'll write a sentence underneath saying, Sanjay, today you've improved the lives of 85 people.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Now I do that not to show off, right? I don't put it on social media and go, hey, look at me. I've spoken to 85 people today, changed their lives, right? It's not about that. I don't share it. I don't show off to Anisha about it. It's purely so at the end of the day, when I read that and I write that down, it tells me that I have done something good, something positive, something that feeling that we talked about, that gives me that feeling. Yeah. That if out of 85 people, if one person's listened to me and it's improved their life, even by 0.5%, I'll take it. It's a win. Yeah. And by reminding myself of that, no matter how shitty the day's been, no matter what's happened in that day, whether I've had an argument with Anisha or something else happened, it's raining, whatever it is, right? I haven't gone out for my run. That, at the end of the day, just grounds me and makes me feel, actually, do you know what? Life's all right. Yeah. You've got something good here. So that's my other tip, is just for people to keep a success tracker, just to track what are the wins in your days, because they are there.
Oh, they absolutely
are there. And we did this in the coaching, it was a slice of success. And, people struggle. We say, I say, well, have you any achievements till I saw you? Not much has happened.
You hit a blank.
Something has happened. Something positive has happened. And look, I get it. There's not going to be positive things all the time, but the smallest things, right? I said to people recently, it could just be the sun shining today. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how much better? I'm sure you're like me. You're feeling better when the sun's shining, right? I know I do. Yeah. So that has been a big game changer for me, just to have that. It's a practice, isn't it?
It is.
Feeling good is a practice.
Yeah. It is.
The more you can find ways to feel good, and even if that's just looking outside and smiling when the weather's good, or having a success tracker, that makes me feel good at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, and I'm pretty sure that will lead to better things in the future.
Yeah, it even inspired me because I know I did start doing that, and then I kind of fell off the bandwagon there with that one. But I think I do that quite a lot mentally, like at the end of the day, in terms of whose lives did I improve and what did I do today. And I think especially, in terms of that feeling good, and it does come down to gratitude. I think I talk a lot to myself, so I probably look really crazy, but I talk a lot to myself. And
Join the club, don't worry.
But I do find, like just in terms of just taking stock. And so, I mean, this week when I've been a little bit in my cloud, I don't know where this cloud has come from, but it's here and it will pass again. I've really had, like, there's been lots. I'll just go for a walk, and I'm like, first of all, look up. Let's not look down. Let's look up. And actually listing those things of who have I spoken to, what conversations have I had. And this might sound a bit morbid, but even just being like, hold on, everybody in your family is healthy right now. And I do sometimes do this, and I'm like, how different would I feel right now if, touch wood, you get a phone call and something's happened to somebody that I really love. Instantly, I'm going to be like, I wish I was back there with those little trivial problems I'm creating in my mind. And I do, that sounds so morbid, but I do use that a lot to come back and be like, hold on, things are actually really good. Things are really good. And let's look at all of those good things, those little things that you just take for granted. Because I'm sure, there've definitely been moments in my life where things have just turned upside down in an instant, and you don't it just completely shifts perspective on like what's important and what's not. But why do we have to wait for those moments?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're so right. And to me, the power in that it's that self-motivation, isn't it? It's just, for me, writing that sentence down at the end of each day makes me feel like wanting to do that again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If I ended every day and wrote down, well, today's been crap. Nothing's happened. It's raining. It's direct debits have been coming out. Left, right, and centre. Then I'm going to feel terrible. I'm going to feel miserable. Then it's a practice, but just by acknowledging that, you know what, I've done something good. And it happens the other way around sometimes, where I will be having a crappy day, and I will be feeling, like you mentioned, the cloud is there. And then someone will say something.
Yeah.
Like someone at the end of a coaching session will just write in the comments in the team's chat, that was wonderful. You've really helped me out, or whatever it is, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forget that actually I'm doing something good, and other people are happy because of what I'm doing. And I think that can be quite powerful.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had it. I've talked about the story when I was teaching spin classes, and the lady comes up to me who's never spoken to me ever and says, I've been listening to you, you've really helped me change my life. And I was like, this is it, this is what I want to do. And that was it. And
I think don't underestimate like the power of those small little steps, actions that you can do. I think even because sometimes we think it's like this grand thing, but actually just listening to someone or a comment and I also feel like sometimes, not getting onto social media, but in a way, the amount of times people have said to me, and again, I'm not putting the tips out there to get that like admiration of that, but then they say, you know what you put up has really, really helped me today. That is so meaningful, because I'm like, I've helped, I've made like a change or a difference.
It's a lot different than just a heart, just liking a post, right? You get likes all the time, but when someone actually takes the time to write to you and say, this has been impactful and powerful.
Because I actually got a message, maybe I shared that in the group, of a mum who I've never worked with before, never met. She left a random comment on one of my posts saying, I've been following your tips for a while, and I use them to take my daughter out to ride her bike. Her daughter had some sort of condition, so it was more challenging. And she's like, but these tips are really well, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, I started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it. I'm like, here I am beating myself up, and look at the difference. It doesn't take a lot. So, but I need to get back on doing that and writing it down. I do. I've got 2 tasks to do. Portuguese. All right, my task's done.
You just mentioned something which I was thinking about earlier. I want to briefly touch on it. Is that sometimes with children, is that, I guess the question is to you, where's the fine line between someone that just maybe needs a little bit of coaching and guidance and when there's a serious kind of a mental health issue? Is that something you come across? Or?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm quite transparent with parents. I always
Right.
say, look, I'm a coach. Whilst I've got a background in psychology, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor.
Right.
And I think, a lot of whenever I always talk to parents first because I want to find out what the challenges and the concerns are. And just yesterday, I had a conversation with a lovely couple who had explained, the challenges they had with their son. And I said, look, I feel my tools and strategies and insights will help, and I'm in no position to diagnose because that's not what I do either. But from all my experience as a teacher and what I've seen in the classroom, and, they mentioned a few things. I was like, would it be more beneficial that I put you in touch with a therapist or a counsellor and somebody that can kind of look under the hood here before you come and work with me? And I mean, there's been cases where parents have said, no, we know there might be something, but we first want the coaching strategies and support. So I do feel for me, integrity is a big thing. I don't ever want to proclaim, I can do X, Y, and Z, and I can't. And, there have been cases parents said, my child's very obsessive or anxious. I'm like, okay, some of these tools will help, but I do not specialize in obsessive compulsive disorder. That's not, I'm not a specialist in anxiety either. So you've got to know what you're working with. And I guess then it's at the parent's discretion of, do they still, some parents have gone ahead. But I do feel, it's, I'm always, for me, I just feel like you've got to know what I can do and what I can support in. And these are tools to help in general. This is not focused on a specific thing. And I mean, I remember once there was a client, a teenager, he was older, so I had a call with him. And bless him, he really, really had a tough time with anxiety to the extent of not wanting to leave the house. And I said, I was compassionate, gave him some strategies to say, but I'm not the person. You're going to get better support from the support that you need right now from other things. But it's a
fine line.
It's a fine line. And I think what makes it so hard now is, and we spoke about this previously outside, is because of lockdown, the natural emotional resiliency I think that children would have developed by going to school, not getting along with a friend, making a mistake, being shouted at by a teacher, all those wobbles that builds their resiliency, they've not had the opportunity to develop that. And so when now we're back at school, but now you're seeing kids in year 2, year 3 that have got real big separation anxiety that you'd see in nursery and reception. So I do think I totally think, look, we'll get through this. It's just us managing our expectations and maybe the benchmarks of where we'd expect them to be emotionally wise. Not in all cases, but just know that if things are a little bit out of character, that's okay. There's nothing. There's nothing wrong. I think there's a lot. Just taking stock. There's a lot going on. That maybe would lead to children, struggling, managing to cope at school and the overwhelm and the pressures of school. And they've not had that for 2 years. Friendships, social skills. I think just trying not to read too much.
Yeah,
it's a fine line.
We're very quick in society to label things, especially now with kids. It's like, they're on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly, if they're the one behaviour that's like, you're on the ADD spectrum, or they're this, or they're this. It's like, well, hold on a minute. It could just be.
It could be a lot of things.
It could be a lot of things, right? It could just be life. It could just be. So I agree. I think it can be a tricky line to be aware of. But I like the fact that the honesty. I think. Yeah. For me. I feel like people respect you more for when you admit you don't know something compared to when you do know something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I turn people away all the time, and I'm sure you find your work with coaching as well. I'm not for every person, just like every client is not for me. And energetically, if there's not the right fit, that's okay. And for me, at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to ever say, oh, I can do that. And I always say, look, these tools are not magic. Sure. And it's as much as the work starts when I leave. I'm not there when they have the meltdowns and when you're having your meltdown. It starts when I go. But at the end of the day, I know and if I feel, and again, how do I know? don't know, but I can just go by my gut. And so far, it's served me really well over the 5 years and the work and the impact that I've had. If I get that inkling, I'll instantly say, look, don't know, maybe, this is what I can do. And that's,
I love that, what you said there about, the work starts when I go. Because it's something I use as well. And I say the hard work is when you go home today.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's when you need to be applying this stuff. That's when you need to be taking action. And that's when I'm not there.
Exactly. And that's actually just, I don't know if I'm going from tangent here, but that's where I've actually didn't talk about one of the things I've started to introduce, because you asked me, do I work with kids, do I work with parents to do together? So in a way, I do work with them together, where I then pre-record material that I get parents and children to work through together. And that has been really impactful. I mean, I initially did it to free up some of my time, but I quite enjoy it. And the results and the impact that parents are getting, where parents are saying it's allowing us to have conversations that I never knew my child felt like this at playtime. But the question you asked, and when you asked us to discuss it and then do the activities, that's like opened up a minefield of stuff that we've not even finished the session. We're going to come back and finish it tomorrow. And I think that's when I'm more there in those moments, because then parents get the full insight into how they can support their kids. Yeah.
Fascinating. I want to ask you about how you stay whole. So this podcast is called Stay Whole, and it's all about just trying to bring ourselves back to whatever being whole means to you. How do we stay on track? How do we manage life? So what are your kind of non-essential, I think I know what your answer is. What are your non-essential habits that help you to stay on track and stay whole?
Definitely exercise, 100%, and has to be done in the morning. Majority of the time, and home going after this afternoon. But exercise to me is more of it's mental health. If I don't, I notice the impact immediately. It can have a big impact on my mindset. And I think what I have noticed, my anxiety tends to be louder in the mornings. And so I know that, okay, if I get out, if I go for a run, if I go to the gym, I'm going to come back, I'm going to feel so much better. So that's a non-negotiable. Definitely some form of mindfulness or meditation. What I have been doing the last year is I've signed on to this program that's all around hypnosis programs, around working a lot with your inner child. And that's been really, so they call them the deep imaginings. It's and that's been really, really good. And there's some journaling prompts there, and it's really fascinating. So I love doing that in the mornings if I can as well. And I think, another non-negotiable is, which I didn't always do, but we definitely do it now, is actually, and it sounds so silly, but I really took my husband for granted in the beginning of the business. And I think that relationship is what's kept me steady. And I think, investing in that is something that is probably the biggest non-negotiable. One of the biggest, my mental health is still there. I think my mental health is number one. But it's that, they go back, actually they go together. But and I think that's something that's really important, finding the time to grow together. Yes. Because I think that's what I struggle. I think, not that we were growing up, you do, don't you? You do.
Yeah, it's different. You live different lives, and it can feel like that sometimes. And I think that's again great awareness that you've come to that realization that actually this is a really important part of the process, and it's one of the reasons that me and Anish we did the first round of coaching. We did it together as a couple.
Wow.
We both did it because I felt like there's no point me going on this coaching and changing my life and doing all these positive, find my purpose and all of that stuff. And she's just doesn't, I'm trying to relay it to a third hand. And I know what she's like. She's lived with a personal trainer long enough. She never does what I say anyway. So, it's like, well, come and hear it from the horse's mouth. And that's been so transformative for us because we I feel like I understand her more.
Yeah, well, definitely.
I completely understand her in a different way that I didn't realize before. So I totally understand that. And I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, so that's one. And then I think one that I it is the switching off from work. So making, and and that's the hard thing, I think, running your own business. You never really fully switched off. But how do I carve out that time? So play is important. Like we've started like ping pong and like silly things like that. And like just even being a tourist in London, it doesn't have to be anything big. It's just that downtime is really important. I mean, I'd love to do paddle boarding but I don't really fancy falling in the lakes. I'm sorry, I want to be in the sea. So that's my challenge. That's a bit of the challenge, is still finding something that I can do more regularly. And the other thing, connection. And I think we've spoken about this before. That keeps me whole because whilst I love being in my own company, and I always like saying, like, what do they call it? An omnivert. I think so I was going to say omnivert. Is it omnivert or omnivert? I'm not sure.
I can't remember. I think it's omnivert, yeah.
Yeah. Mess it up, sorry. But it's, you're not extrovert, you're not introvert, you're a bit of both. And I definitely find I do thrive when I'm in company of others as well. So that would be my whole.
Yeah, I have to say, connection is the key to fulfillment. It
is.
So I 100% resonate with that.
Yeah.
I've loved connecting with you.
Loved it.
It's been amazing. I think we've had so many conversations, and it's nice to. It's not that I want to only be surrounded by people that think like me or like-minded, but it's just sometimes when you're on this journey, it feels lonely.
Yeah.
It feels lonely. And when you speak to someone and you think, oh, well, they're going through the same thing. Oh, they're thinking the same thing. Oh, they're having the same struggles and they're still struggling with social media. All of those things. Like, it's not just me. It's that there's that shared experience. Yeah. We're all going through it. And I think that's really key. But I think the work that you're doing is phenomenal.
Thank
I think
you.
Just, taking care of the mental health of future generations, the parents who are struggling. I think that's such an important tool, which our parents didn't have when they were coming through, when they were navigating through life. So I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about what you're doing, what you're up to? Where can they watch your wonderful? We didn't even talk about your TV appearances and. Where can they learn more about all that?
So I'm on Instagram a lot, so Power Thoughts NC. My website, obviously, powerthoughts.co.uk. I have been experimenting with LinkedIn. I'm really enjoying LinkedIn. I'm having a lot of fun with that. So I think that's just Natalie Costa, Power Thoughts. Natalie Costa, my name. So those are the main places I hang out. And then, yes, I'm a super tutor for BBC Bite Size. So that was around emotional well-being. So we did some stuff last year.
Amazing.
So there's some stuff there. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, go and check it out. I think you'll learn lots and lots. There's lots of free stuff on your website.
Yeah,
as well.
There's loads of free things, lots and lots of free stuff as well, and lots of videos on Instagram. Brilliant. I do need to start a YouTube channel. Yes, I'll contact you for that.
We'll put that in the diary.
We'll put a Lily for that.
Yeah, put her for that.
Set it up for me.
Yeah, she'll be all over that. Natalie, thank you so much.
Thank
it's been
you.
amazing.
Oh, thank you so much.